When I was 7 years old, this photograph was taken of me, mimicking the pose of a Degas ballerina. I didn't know the term French modernism. I didn't know anything about Impressionism. I just knew that I wanted to step into her pose because I wanted to feel her balance, her power, her grace, because I was curious about her life. I wondered who trained her, what was expected of her. Today we might call that kinesthetic empathy. But back then I didn't know there was a term for what I was doing. And then years later, I would learn that was called art history. What a privilege to study beauty. But art history gave me something far more than just beauty. It gave me a way of studying lives beyond my own. Time travel, really. Because every painting and every sculpture and every palace opened a doorway into another culture's values and dreams and fears. And art history is about more than just looking. It's about practicing empathy across time. In my undergraduate education, I would be fortunate enough to study under these two women, two of the first women to earn doctorates in the field of art history. They loved art history deeply, with passionate, contagious passion. And they taught me how to question art history, because the story that I was being taught was very narrow. And it was being taught in a straight line. Ancient Greece, to the Renaissance, to Impressionism, to modernism. And the textbooks, well, they were filled with great masters, but almost all of them were European, and almost all of them were men. Rarely did we ask, who decides what gets to count as art? And whose stories are missing? But these realizations, they didn't make me fall out of love with art history. They made me commit to it. Because if the story that I was learning was narrow, there was work to be done. And that work matters urgently today. We're living in a time of profound transformation. We've got global migration, digital acceleration, cultural reckoning. And at a time like this, we don't need more ways of looking at data or understanding information. We need ways of understanding each other. And art history, at its best, is one of those ways. For most of the 20th century, art history has focused on a very narrow number of cities: Rome, Paris, London, New York. But now, that map is expanding. We're looking at a far greater picture where children in Lagos or Mumbai see their own histories reflected. We're studying the way that ideas travel through trade, migration, and exchange. And instead of approaching art history with the idea of non-Western and Western, we're asking questions like, what brings us together? What connects us? And in this version of history, no one culture holds the center. The center is everywhere. And this matters because this builds cultural resilience. When people see themselves reflected in history, they're empowered to shape the future. Technology is changing the way that we see art. AI can scan thousands of images to detect workshop practices. Virtual reality, it allows us to experience temples that have long been lost. And digitization allows us to go into archives that were very fragile, or even prehistoric caves that have been closed. But this isn't about access, it's about connection. Because somebody with a disability or somebody living in a rural town can now experience art that was once locked away. You see, digital tools are not replacing the humanities. They're expanding who has access to them. And another transformation is about voice. We're seeing indigenous curators reframing collections in museums. We're seeing colonized communities telling their own stories. We're seeing feminist and queer scholars restoring erased lineage. And these things, they are not academic correction. It's cultural repair. And repair is another form of resilience. Artists today are in dialogue with history. They're challenging it. They're remixing it. They're reframing it, re-examining it. Because art history is not a static discipline. It's an active conversation about memory and power and justice. And it's moving out of the lecture halls. It's moving into podcasts, social media, digital archives. Because art history is becoming participatory, public, and human. Sometimes I want to go back to that 7-year-old girl working very hard to hold the ballerina pose. And I want to tell her, one day you'll learn that art is about far more than beauty, even more than empathy. It's about power, memory, justice. And one day you'll be a part of a generation of scholars, artists, and communities working together to widen the stories we tell. Because that is what this discipline makes possible, not just for scholars, but for all of us. So, where does that leave us? Art history is becoming more global, more digital, more engaged, more inclusive than ever before. But its greatest transformation is not technological, it's human. Because art history teaches us to stop and to look again and to ask, who is speaking? Who is missing? Who gets to be seen? And those questions don't just change how we see art, they change how we see each other. In an era of rapid change, division, and disconnection, these things might be our most powerful tool for resilience, empowerment, and human connection. Art history is not a closed book. It's an evolving conversation, one that belongs to us all. And if we engage it fully, we don't just learn about the past. We learn how to imagine a more just and more connected future. Thank you.